Central District Court, Monday morning. The atmosphere in the courtroom was not the heavy silence typical of serious trials. Instead, it was filled with stifled chuckles, the squeak of chairs being shifted, and smug glances from the right-hand gallery, where three police officers, Marcus Reiner, Lucas Klein, and Anton Weiss, sat leaning back in their seats, legs crossed, as if watching a dull comedy show. It's that same judge again. The one who handled the eviction case last time, remember? Lucas whispered, eyes scanning the room. Of course. I even gave him a box of Cuban cigars back then, Marcus replied with a smirk, voice low enough for only the other two to hear. Anton shrugged. It's already over. They've got nothing on us. Witnesses? Gone. Evidence? Lost in the system. Who'd be dumb enough to go up against us? The three middle-aged men, graying hair but still bearing the hardened look of those who had weathered hundreds of arrests, were now savoring their victory before the final whistle. In front of them lay a file over 400 pages thick. Allegations of racial discrimination, abuse of power, and evidence planting against people of color, particularly in poor neighborhoods. Yet, as in every case before, the file, no matter how thick, how damning, could not penetrate the armor of the protection system they had so carefully constructed over the years. At the back of the courtroom, a young prosecutor, Anna Richter, clenched her fists, eyes fixed on the judge. She knew she had lost, not due to a lack of arguments, but because the crucial pieces of truth had been bent, erased, or buried. The judge, a white man in his early 60s with neatly slicked-back silver hair, struck the gavel. Having reviewed all documents and found insufficient grounds for prosecution, the court declares, the defendants not guilty. This trial is adjourned. For a brief moment, silence blanketed the room. Then, scattered applause broke out from the family section of the three officers. Marcus beamed, stretching like someone freed from a tedious meeting. Told you so, he said, turning to Lucas. They can never touch us. Lucas laughed triumphantly. Those idiots thought security camera footage would be enough? What cameras? Anton patted the handgun on his hip, a habit whenever he felt pleased, and muttered, We are the system, and the system doesn't prosecute itself. They stood, shook hands with their defense attorney, a man dressed in an Armani suit, and walked away from the defendant's bench like heroes emerging victorious from the jaws of death. None of them knew that, at that very moment, someone had entered the courtroom. Someone whose past had been trampled by them, and whose future would lead them into darkness. But that is a story for the next chapter. The courtroom door swung open, and a cold gust swept in, despite the blazing summer sun outside. Just as the three officers were about to step over the threshold, a stranger appeared. He wore a sharply tailored navy blue suit, a crisp white shirt, a slim tie, and polished black leather shoes. No introduction was needed. His presence alone brought the room to a halt. His eyes, cold, calm, swept across the room as if he could see through everything. There was no hatred, no anger, but deep within lay a power so commanding that no one dared to breathe too loudly. The judge, still seated on the bench, immediately stood and cleared his throat. Before we conclude today's proceedings, I have an official announcement from the mayor's office. All eyes turned toward him. The three officers turned as well, narrowing their eyes at the sight of the unfamiliar man stepping to the front of the room. As of today, the judge continued, the Central City Police Department will have a new chief of police, as per an appointment signed this morning. A few murmurs rippled through the courtroom. No one had heard of any personnel change, especially not at such a sensitive time. But the judge took a deep breath, as if preparing to deliver something of solemn weight. Please welcome, Chief Julian Moreau. Marcus frowned. Lucas froze. Anton tilted his head slightly. That name, it sounded familiar. Too familiar. The man stepped into the center of the courtroom. Julian Moreau. Around 6 feet 1 inch, bronze-skinned, square jaw, neatly trimmed beard like that of a soldier, shoulders straight, posture perfect, each step measured with precision. Nothing excessive, nothing showy. The silence now hung in the courtroom like smoke. Marcus squinted. Then his eyes widened. Lucas instinctively stepped back. Anton couldn't speak. Sweat began to bead at his temples. Julian Moreau, the black man they had arrested 3 years ago in a so-called traffic stop. A minor incident, or so they had thought. They had dragged him out of his car, slammed his head onto the curb, rifled through his bag, then planted a small packet of white powder, claiming it might be cocaine. When Julian had asked for a lawyer, Marcus had laughed. "You're lucky we didn't shoot you on the spot." The case file later disappeared. Julian was released without an apology. He didn't sue. He didn't fight back. He simply vanished from their radar. Until today. Julian stood at the front of the courtroom, eyes locked on the 3 men who had once been his abusers. His voice rang out, deep, steady, devoid of rage, yet with the weight of a hammer. "You are Marcus Reiner, Lucas Klein, and Anton Weiss, correct?" No one answered. No answer was needed. Julian gave a small nod. "I look forward to working with you in the days ahead." Marcus opened his mouth, voice raspy. I didn't think." Lucas cut in, forcing a smile. "Chief Moreau, it's an honor to meet you. Honestly, we didn't expect to be working alongside." Julian tilted his head slightly, a gesture that bordered on courteous, but was loaded with challenge. "Surprise is natural, because starting today, nothing will be as it was." With that, he turned his back to them. No farewell. No extra words. He exited the courtroom with crisp, unwavering steps. The door closed behind him. The air remained heavy. The 3 officers stood frozen, as if they had just seen a storm. Not from the sky, but from their own past. The next morning, Central Police Department. Unlike any other day, the atmosphere inside the building was thick with wary silence. No polite nods, no casual banter between departments, even footsteps echoed with a heavy drag. Marcus Reiner, Lucas Klein, and Anton Weiss stepped into the main lobby, and for the first time, they felt it clearly. The air had changed. The younger officers, those who used to greet them with reverence, now only glanced briefly before looking away. No one spoke. No one smiled. Only silence and stares. "What the hell is going on?" Marcus muttered, eyes scanning the room. Lucas tugged at his collar. "I don't like this. We're outsiders now." Anton forced a dry chuckle. "It's just a reaction. They'll get used to it. Julian's just some lucky guy with political backing. He can't touch us." But even Anton didn't believe his own words. The elevator doors opened. On the 3rd floor, the main command conference room was already packed. Every unit head, team leader, and internal representative had been summoned for an emergency meeting that morning. Julian Moreau stood at the head of the table. He didn't need to tap on the desk or raise his voice. Everyone fell silent the moment he looked up. He wore the deep blue uniform of the chief of police, silver stars gleaming on his shoulders. The fluorescent lights caught the badge on his chest, not just a symbol of rank, but of legitimacy in a system that had long been decaying. Julian's eyes scanned the room, stopping exactly where the 3 men had just entered. Reiner, Klein, Weiss. The 3 halted. Lucas swallowed hard. Marcus raised a shoulder, trying to appear composed, but his spine had stiffened. "Step forward." They had no choice. For the first time, they approached Julian, not as equals, but from a lower ground. Julian placed a thick black folder in front of them, nearly 4 inches deep, stamped "Internal Confidential." He opened it. Inside were copies of complaint forms, crime scene photographs, cross-referenced patrol logs against witness statements, secretly retrieved security footage from hard drives, and most damning of all, internal memos signed by officers who had once remained silent but were now stepping forward. Julian didn't look up. He spoke evenly. "The materials in front of me document 18 incidents directly involving the 3 of you over the past 5 years. Marcus began to speak, but Julian cut him off. "I don't want excuses. I'm not here for performative remorse. I'm here to inform." He closed the folder and looked each man directly in the eye. "Effective immediately, all 3 of you are suspended from duty pending an investigation by the Internal Oversight Committee. The order takes effect now. Weapons and badges, leave them with the secretary." A low murmur rippled through the room. A few officers exhaled quietly, relieved. Others stared wide-eyed, unable to believe what had just happened. Marcus growled, "This is revenge. You're abusing your power." Julian's face didn't change. "No. This is procedure. And for the first time in years, it's being followed correctly. Anton reached out as if to stop him. We've served for over 20 years. You can't just. Julian tilted his head slightly, voice sharp as a blade. It's precisely because you've served so long that this system has rotted so quickly. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to defend. The three men left the room, not like heroes exiting a courtroom, but like heavy shadows dragging themselves toward the door. Once they were gone, Julian looked around the room. Then, for the first time, he spoke words meant for the entire department. This police station is no longer a haven for corruption. From today forward, you either serve justice or you step aside. No one objected. 2 weeks after the suspension, the city of Altenburg was shaken. News broke across every media outlet. 3 veteran officers, Marcus Reiner, Lucas Klein, and Anton Weiss, were under investigation for systemic abuse of power, human rights violations, and fabrication of criminal evidence. Front pages blazed with headlines. Newspapers that had once stayed silent now dissected every detail of the buried cases. Evening talk shows erupted with heated debates, and citizens didn't take to the streets to protest. This time, they gathered to celebrate. At police headquarters, a purge begins. Chief Julian Moreau hadn't slept much since taking office. Each morning, he arrived at the station before anyone else. Quietly, he reviewed personnel files, audited reporting procedures, and met privately with team leaders to restructure the department from the inside out. The Citizen Complaint Office, once a graveyard for ignored paperwork, was now fully staffed, given independent oversight, and open 24/7. Every old complaint was exhumed. Many pointed to the same 3 names that had recently been suspended. Inside the Internal Affairs Division, witnesses who once lived in fear were finally speaking up. Some asked for anonymity. Others, now old, still remembered with painful clarity. They pulled me over late at night. No reason. Said I smelled like weed, searched my car, beat me. I'm a teacher. I've never touched the stuff. They forced me to sign a confession. Said if I didn't, I'd lose custody of my child. These were not just allegations, they came with evidence, security footage from private residences previously overlooked, internal phone records, falsified patrol logs now cross-referenced and exposed. Julian wasn't rushing. He was building a staircase solid, irreversible. Not out of revenge, but to ensure no one could undo what was being done. In the shadows, the fallen struggled to breathe. Marcus Reiner sat in his darkened apartment, lights off, curtains drawn. The TV was on mute, showing a news report about him. On screen, his photo in uniform was placed beside the headline, "Officer or Offender?" Lucas called, his voice taut like a drawn wire. They found the audio from the West District Patrol. The time we checked, that black kid. Shut up, Marcus snapped. That case was buried. Nothing's buried anymore. Lucas shouted. Julian's tearing it all down. He's coming straight for us. Anton said nothing. He was already contacting a criminal defense lawyer, not to win, but to survive. The day of reckoning. June 14th, Julian held a press conference in front of the police headquarters. He stepped out in plain clothes, a simple white shirt. No epaulets. No stars. No gun. Only transparency. Behind him stood a board listing the charges being filed. 12 unlawful arrests. 9 citizen complaints for police brutality. 5 instances of evidence tampering. 2 cases of missing items from the evidence locker. And dozens of witness statements independently verified. A reporter asked, Chief Moreau, aren't you afraid of retaliation? You're doing what no one has dared to do in Altenburg. Julian answered without hesitation. If justice leads to retaliation, then that's the clearest sign this had to be done. He paused, then added, I'm not here to play politics. I'm here because of a promise, one that says the people of the city should no longer feel fear every time they see a police badge. Applause broke out. National media began covering the story. Julian Moreau was no longer a name in the shadows, he had become a symbol. Altenburg District Court 3 months later. From early morning, the courthouse halls were packed. Outside, reporters lined up with cameras ready. The electronic bulletin board displayed in bold. Trial of Reiner, Klein, and Weiss begins at 9 a.m. Courtroom 3A. This was no longer an internal hearing. This was a full criminal trial, public, transparent, with a jury, media coverage, and the attention of a nation. The charges were clear. The 3 defendants, Marcus Reiner, Lucas Klein, and Anton Weiss, sat silently in the defendant's box. No more expensive suits, no badges on their shoulders. Just 3 men in plain, monochrome suits, faces tight, eyes sunken, hands clenched. Facing them stood prosecutor Anna Richter, the same woman who had once lost the preliminary hearing. But this time her eyes were sharp, bright, and cold as a blade. She stood and opened her argument. "Your Honor, this is not a trial about individual mistakes. This is a trial about a broken system where a police badge became a license to oppress. The defendants didn't just harm their victims, they damaged the public's faith in justice itself." She laid several documents before the judge. 3 previously unreleased internal audio recordings, 5 original residential security camera videos, 14 cross-verified witness testimonies from independent agencies, 1 official investigative report from the Internal Oversight Committee signed by Chief Julian Moreau himself. The courtroom fell silent as the first recording played. Marcus's voice. "I don't care if he actually committed a crime. Black like that? That's reason enough to check." Lucas's voice. "I slipped a packet into his back pocket. Bet we'll find evidence just fine." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. In the gallery, a middle-aged man gripped his daughter's hand as she quietly wept. A fragile defense. The defense attorney attempted to object. This evidence was obtained improperly. The process was violated. But the judge, recently appointed, remained firm. "The court has verified the legal admissibility of all materials. We will proceed." The lawyer turned back, and Lucas whispered, "She's got us cornered." Marcus tapped his thigh, trying to steady himself, though sweat streamed behind his ear. Anton said nothing. He knew this was the end of the line, a final word from a special witness. Just when it seemed the case had exhausted its weight, Anna called her last witness. The prosecution calls Chief Julian Moreau. The room stirred. Julian entered in full uniform, back straight, badge gleaming. He took the stand, was sworn in, and looked directly at the 3 men who had nearly destroyed his life. "I don't need to retell what I went through with them. The footage speaks. The records speak. The witnesses speak. I just want to remind this court of one thing." He looked toward the judge, then turned to the jury. "That if we let this pass again today, no one will ever believe in justice again. And I say this not just as a victim. I say it as a police officer, one who swore to uphold the law, not bend it." No one replied. No one needed to. The verdict. After a full day of testimony, the jury returned in just 58 minutes. The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman, stood and spoke. For all charges presented, including abuse of authority, unjustified use of force, systemic discrimination, evidence tampering, human rights violations, we find the defendants guilty. The courtroom erupted, not with rage, but with applause and muffled tears. No revenge, just relief that truth had finally won. The 3 men, once symbols of power, were handcuffed and escorted out. As they passed Julian, Marcus turned, bitterness in his eyes. "You set us up." Julian didn't smile. He didn't flinch. Then he replied quietly, "No, you destroyed yourselves. I just turned on the light." The heavy doors closed behind them. The lock echoed. The end of an era. That evening, the news opened with one line: 3 former police officers convicted, marking the end of a dark chapter in Altenburg's history. Back at police headquarters, a new sign was hung in the main hallway, right behind the public reception desk. On it, Julian's words: "Justice is not a feeling. It is an action, and it starts with us." A light rain fell over the city of Altenburg that morning, but no one complained. The rain carried something different. Not gloom, not chill, but relief. As if the skies themselves wanted to wash away the stain that had lingered over the city for so many years. At the Central Police Headquarters, Julian Moreau sat alone in his office. No cameras, no advisors, just a steaming cup of black tea and a large map of Altenburg spread out before him. Marked across it were red, blue, yellow, and orange dots. Not charting crime rates, but something far more telling: the degree of public distrust in the police. His eyes rested on the largest red dot: Southridge, the neighborhood where he had once been wrongfully detained, where a 14-year-old boy was handcuffed in front of his mother for suspicious behavior. where an elderly man was shoved to the ground simply for asking why he was being stopped. Julian sat still, but his gaze was not heavy. It was focused. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Lieutenant Lena Vogel entered, the first woman Julian had appointed as deputy commander, chosen from within the internal ranks. Her face was steady, her hair tightly pinned back, yet her eyes retained a quiet compassion, the kind Julian considered essential. Competence paired with humanity. "Chief, the final report from the Reform Council is complete," Lena said, handing him a thick folder. "All 72 recommendations have been approved, including restructuring the citizen complaint system and independent oversight of the rapid response teams." Julian nodded, flipped through the first few pages, then closed the folder, resting his hand on it like a promise. "And the community outreach program?" he asked. "It begins next week. We've assigned young officers to visit every neighborhood for open dialogues. No weapons, no uniforms, just people talking to people." Julian smiled. Not a proud smile, not a bitter one, but the quiet smile of someone who knows the path ahead is long, but true. That afternoon, Julian visited North Alder High School, where a dialogue between students and police was being held. In the modest auditorium, about 100 students and teachers were gathered. A young black boy stood up, hands slightly trembling, eyes downcast. "Chief Moreau, I want to trust the police, but some of my friends say, trust them, just to end up face down again? How are we supposed to believe?" The room fell silent. Julian walked over, knelt down so they were eye to eye. No microphone, no speech. "You don't have to trust," he said gently. "Not right away. My job is to keep doing the work until you want to. Not because of what we say, but because of what we do." The silence lingered. Then one person clapped. Then another. Then a third. It wasn't thunderous. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like encouragement on both sides. That evening, Julian returned to his office alone. The rain had stopped. On his desk sat 3 small objects. The old police badges of Marcus Reiner, Lucas Klein, and Anton Weiss. He hadn't kept them as reminders of them, but as reminders to himself of what happens when power exists without accountability. He picked up a pen and opened his personal notebook. Not a report, not a memo. Just one line. Justice doesn't end in court. It lives in the small choices every day. When he left the office, the lights went dark. Night settled over the city. But for the first time in many years, Altenburg was no longer a city of fear. It was becoming a city of hope.